10 things your parents didn't tell you about personal finances. If you were fortunate, your parents sat you down at some point and you had the talk. No, not the talk about sex. The talk about personal finances. Or maybe you were like me and your parents never discussed money with you. I guess mine thought I'd either figure it out on my own or just sort of pick it up by osmosis. In any event, I finally did learn the important lessons about personal finances, but in some cases, it was definitely the hard way. Like the time my wife and I decided to have a home custom built for us when we hardly knew what a mortgage was. Even if your mother or father did have the talk with you, the odds are that there were some things they neglected to tell you that are important, and here are 10 of them. 1. Being in debt is like indentured servitude. If you're not familiar with the term indentured servitude, the online encyclopedia Wikipedia defines it as a voluntary labor system whereby young people paid for their passage to the new world by working for an employer for a certain number of years. The reason why debt is like this is basically what you're doing is sacrificing future earnings, working for a credit card company, in exchange for instant gratification, passage to the new world. How do you avoid going into debt? It's pretty simple. If you have a credit card, make sure you pay off your balance on time every month. Ditto, store charge cards and an auto loan if you have one. I understand that it takes a certain amount of self-discipline to do this, but it will pay off in years ahead when you're not sending 20 or 30% of your hard-earned income off to a credit card company or companies. 2. If you need to ask your boss for a raise, you need a new employer. Assuming that you come to work every day on time and are good at your job, you should earn a raise without having to ask for one. If you work for a corporation, you probably get an annual review accompanied by a raise of some kind. If not, you'll be at the mercy of your employer. But again, if you're doing a good job, you should earn a raise without having to beg for one. And if you do have to beg for one, you might want to think about finding a new employer. 3. You can't manage your money if you don't track your income and outgo. The cornerstone of good money management is to know how much you earn and where your money's going. Most of us do know how much we earn, but if you're not tracking your spending, it's like playing baseball without keeping score. You may believe you're ahead, but you could actually be falling further and further in debt. There are a number of smartphone apps available today that make tracking spending drop dead simple. Alternately, you could just use a pen and a notepad. But whichever method you choose, it's important to note all of your expenditures right down to the penny. Add them up at the end of the month, and you'll then know whether you're winning or losing. If you find that you're losing or spending more than you earn, you will need to find areas where you can cut costs. If you would like more information about tracking spending, here, courtesy of National Debt Relief, is a video that reveals 3 ways to do this. 4. Only suckers play the lottery. If you're carrying a boatload of debt, don't think that playing the lottery is your way out. A very smart person once said, "Lotteries are for the mathematically challenged." We have radio commercials for our state's lottery that generally ends with words like, "Chances of winning the Powerball lottery are 1 in 25.4 million. You have a better chance of getting struck by lightning than winning one of those lotteries. 5. Shun those credit card convenience checks. Convenience checks are those that you receive periodically from your credit card company or companies. They might seem like a convenient way to get cash, but the interest rate on these things are often anything but convenient. Convenience checks usually come with a fee of 3% or 4% of the amount you're borrowing, plus a very high interest rate. Most credit card companies charge the same interest rate on a convenience check as cash advances. This means the interest on a convenience check could be twice that of purchases. 6. A spreadsheet can help even the most disorganized. Even if you're a very disorganized or scatterbrained person, a spreadsheet could help you successfully manage your personal finances. You could use one to track your spending, create and stick to a budget, and help you pay off your debts. If you don't have a spreadsheet program such as Excel, there are free ones available through OpenOffice.org, Google Docs, Kingsoft, and a number of other sources. While it may take you 30 minutes or an hour to set up a spreadsheet, once you've done this, it probably won't require more than a few minutes a week to keep your personal finances under control. 7. Patience is a huge virtue when it comes to saving money. You've undoubtedly heard the old story about the tortoise and the hare. When it comes to saving money, the tortoise is clearly the winner and by a wide margin. This is due to compounding interest. You could put as little as $50 a month in a savings account and end up with several hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're not familiar with compounding interest, it's basically where you earn interest on interest. For example, if you put that $50 into a savings account that pays 2% annually, you would have $612 at the end of the year and $1,236 at the end of year 2, or your $612 plus $600 plus 2%. 8. Money won't buy happiness. A friend of mine used to say that while money won't buy happiness, it will run a bunch of fun until happiness comes along. But that, of course, isn't really true either. Real happiness doesn't come from having enough money to buy a bunch of stuff. Nirvana comes from financial freedom. You might think that the guy that drives an almost new Lexus is better off than your friend who drives an old beater, but this is often not the case. The guy in the Lexus may be up to his belly button in debt, while the friend in the old beater has more than $100,000 in his 401k. If you live prudently and save a good portion of your income, the day will come when no man will be your master, and you will be financially free, which is true happiness. 9. Not everyone needs a budget. We don't know of a single financial guru that doesn't preach the importance of having a budget, but the truth is that not everyone needs one. Some people just instinctually know how much they're spending versus their income, and how to keep the former from getting ahead of the latter. You may also not need a budget if your finances are relatively simple. 10. Frugality is not the be-all and end-all. You may have read some of the many articles regarding the importance of living frugally. Of course, living frugal is never a bad idea. However, frugality has its limits. You could cut your spending to the very bone and still not have enough money to create an emergency savings account or to invest. The best answer sometimes is finding ways to earn more money. For example, this might be harsh, but you could get a second job. Our economy is mostly back to what it was before the Great Recession, and there are many companies now hiring part-time employees. These jobs generally don't pay much, usually $9 to $10 an hour, but 20 hours a week could go a long ways towards funding your savings account or making investments. If you need help with credit card debt, National Debt Relief offers a free debt consultation to help with credit card problems. Call 888-866-0778 or visit nationaldebtrelief.com today.
Now, when I hear the answer to these questions, the standard answer I hear is that people are going to cut back on administration and protect teachers, class sizes, other classroom-related expenditures. But I've read a lot in education, and it leads me to believe that trimming administrative fat won't result in multi-million dollar savings. It simply doesn't happen based on what I know. So the question is, that's a bit of a preamble, just address ways that you think you can find savings.
One more time, please.
Pardon? Okay, I'm sorry. Address ways you think you... I'm sorry, I'm losing it here. Okay. Address ways you think you would find savings to help make the best use of TUSD funds, and if you think cutting administrative costs will produce substantial savings, it would be helpful if you could give some examples of where the administrative waste can be found.
That's a pretty tall order in a minute.
I know that. Minute 10.
A minute 10.
Probably the most important function of the board is the budget, because it's through the budget that policy is implemented, and I think the board generally has been pretty weak on this. As far as a priority, I think that I would want to direct a great deal more funding at struggling students in the very early experiences they're having in education, that is K1 and 2. I think it's a tragedy that these children are kind of knotted through the system, and by the time they hit high school, which I find at Tucson High, a shocking number come to 9th grade not able to begin to do high school level work. That's got to stop. Those kids are always going to be failures, and it's not their fault.
The $17 million figure is a myth. Staff's admitted in the last few days that they miscalculated that from the beginning. If 204 passes, then we'll not have that kind of a deficit. And if it doesn't pass, we have no idea. So we shouldn't even mention that number anymore. I do believe that there is a lot of room to cut in administration. That's one reason I voted against this year's budget. I have pushed for procurement reforms and rebids and bids of contracts over the last several years that have saved millions of dollars. And that's just one example of where there is fat in the budget. So I really believe that's there. I am advocating that the board set percentage floors on the amount of money to be spent in the classroom for the next 2 or 3 fiscal years. The TUSD is one of the lowest in the state on money spent in the classrooms, much lower than even we were 5 years ago. And I think the board needs to set a floor and force the administrative cuts to happen.
I think the idea of cutting at the administrative level is important to consider, but we have to also look at it in a more broad-based fashion. I think it's going to take a lot of different things in order to balance the budget. The $17 million issue, again, not an issue, but as a Pima County employee, I am required to forecast, along with the rest of my team in my department, a year, possibly even a year and a half to 2 years, as to how we're going to expend the funds we have available to us. They're taxpayer dollars. The $17 million, whether or not that's real or not, it's still taxpayer dollars. $1, $17 million. So we have to be responsible about how we forecast this. And that starts, again, with Dr. Petticone and his team. If they are not entirely sure how much money that's at stake, that's an issue. And I think we have to make sure, again, that budget is transparent and accessible to people. I think revenue generating is important. I think looking at expanding summer school, expanding, again, the use of our facilities, and possibly cutting some of that fat.
So again, whatever the number is, I think it's time to take a hard look at the district and the way it's organized. And I think that the way we can do that, we can raise money by renting out our facilities. We can attack some of the problems where they are. If the problem is that our schools are not energy efficient, we can make an agreement with JTED. I have already gone and looked into these things to find out if these are viable solutions. And in fact, I have not had anybody tell me that they were not. We could put together a program with JTED to make our buildings sustainable. Once we have sustainable buildings, perhaps with solar energy on the roof that are actually feeding energy back into the solar grid, the electricity grid, we could actually be making money with our school buildings. Our schools could be serving the community by opening our libraries in the same way that we open our parks. By renting out our facilities, putting in school-based medical clinics. There are actually federal grants for these things. Are we looking for those things? I want us to.
Well, here's the thing, folks. If you have a budget deficit at home, you're not going to put a solar panel on your roof. You're going to make a real decision, and that is you're going to cut back the cable bills and anything else, and you're going to trim. Now, as a district, the reality is a $17 million deficit is very real. The stimulus dollars really pushed off this cliff, and that's where we're at right now. The stimulus dollars have dried up, and that's what's happening, including declining enrollment, which most major districts in Arizona are seeing. Now, we can cut 10-10 if you want. That's $8 million. You're still not going to solve the $17 million deficit, and you don't have any administration or any functions. I believe we need to look at non-classroom dollars. We need to look at the possibility of outsourcing operation functions like transportation, like food services. Other of these candidates are not prepared to make real decisions because they're in cahoots with the unions that have